Hello, my name is Michael Wade, and I'm here today with Hamilton Mann, the Group VP of Digital Marketing and Digital Transformation at Thales, the large French aerospace, defense, and cybersecurity company. Hamilton is also a member of the Thinkers 50 Radar 2024 as one of the top 30 business thinkers to watch. Welcome to the session, Hamilton.
Thank you for having me, Michael.
I'd like to start with a question about the role of digital in organizations. You've been in digital for a long time. How has the role of digital changed?
Yes, that's an interesting question, actually, because I think when it comes to the change, right, that we see in organization, it very much happened not, let's say, because of digital, actually. It very much happens because of the transformation that we make. And it, let's say, requires a bit more than just digital, than just tools to, let's say, deliver that transformation per se. So I will say that at least we may have learned along the way to drive transformation at scale in such a group, let's say, companies like Thales, considering the multi-dimensionals, right, that is at play when it comes to driving any kind of benefits from digitals, because of course it requires, let's say, competencies, it requires culture change, it requires processes change, and all those elements coming together is, what drives the transformation per se. Digital is just, let's say, one, component of all that journey.
This is certainly consistent with our point of view. Digital is an enabler, a powerful one, but you cannot do it alone. You need many other things to happen in concert with the digital. And one of those things, one of those barriers that has to be overcome often is the silo effect in organizations. We know that the power of digital and data is amplified by scale. But scale means you often have to break those silos. And I know you've had quite a bit of experience doing this in Thales. What's your point of view on how to break those silos to truly capture the value of digital tools, technologies, and data?
Yeah, so you're right. Definitely in large organization, but not, let's say, specifically for large organization. I think all organizations are coping with that challenge. You do have some silos. This is quite, let's say, human in a way. It very much starts by, let's say, the necessity of people mastering, let's say, a form of autonomy for doing their job, right? Which is great, of course, because we want to have in organization some, let's say, department, etc., that are, let's say, in a form of an autonomous manner, driving their businesses and driving their result. However, this goes also with kind of a trap that we need to avoid, which is having organizations that are too much autonomous. And so they are very much entrenched within their, let's say, within the wall of their department. And then comes the silo effect, right? If I don't need you to do what I have to do each and every day, I stay where I am, right? I'm the comfort zones, and nothing, let's say, will, let's say, drive me or lead me to collaborate with other departments or other people. So to me, I've learned, let's say, at least two things, right? In those kind of a very, let's say, large transformation at scale, because you're right, this is very much a kind of a challenge on which you need to cope with that, let's say, issues in terms of making people collaborate together. The first is making sure that we incorporate some very, let's say, challenging objectives within department, not the form of objective on which you are sure that they are going to deliver in an autonomous way, because this will not help, but very much objective that at least can fall in two buckets, or one of them. First, overlap, and second, contradictory objectives.
So explain more what you mean by these two things.
So what is very counterintuitive on that point is that when you talked about overlap and contradictory objectives, right, within an organization, this is basically the things that sometimes you're trying to figuring out how to, let's say, remove that, right? Mm-hmm. You don't want to have overlap and you don't want to have contradictory objectives, sure, right? And the funny thing is that sometimes you are looking for, let's say, external helps, right, to help you cope with those issues, and consultants help you, right, removing overlap, removing contradictory objectives. I've learned that you need to have a kind of a dose of that on purpose, formally incorporate in the framework of the objective setting of your organization. So let me start with contradictory objective, right? The idea of the contradictory objective is quite very simple. We deal with that every day because we have no choice to deal with that, right? But here's the idea is to say, okay, I'm going to, let's say, on purpose, in a kind of a voluntary manner, right? Put that into place within organization. So where we deal with that every day, because we have no choice, is, for example, where we want to, let's say, deliver increasing revenue while maintaining the bottom line at a certain, let's say, level, or even reducing cost. Contradictory, because of course, if you want to increase your revenue, sometimes you are led to, let's say, burn resources to do so, right?
Sure.
So when you have to deal with such a thing, and many organizations have to deal with that since years and years and years, you definitely are, let's say, driving the sort of a contradictory objective that force a given organization not only to rely on its own force, the autonomous resources and, let's say, means that they have, but also to collaborate, right? Not because it is fun to do so, not because it is, let's say, things to do, but because you have to if you want to achieve your overall objective. So to me, the contradictory objective is key. Another example is like for digital, we've seen that, if we want to cope with the ideas of, let's say, gaining a fair share of, let's say, those benefits that we sometimes foresee with digital, you need to have a kind of an ambidextrous organization able to deliver and continue to deliver excellence result in, let's say, what we call the traditional, let's say, businesses, etc., the legacy ones, right? That are basically, let's say, making the company, performing so far, etc. So you absolutely don't want to disrupt that. So you need to continue to be excellent on that. And at the same time, while surpassing your objective in your legacy businesses, you also need to develop some kind of ability to be agile, to be at speed, because you want to take some decision in a kind of a very agile way, not waiting for having perfection to go for it, etc. And those elements require contradictory approach, organization, skills, etc., and of course objectives. If you want an organization to be transformed, you need to have in the objective setting framework, the two things living together, right? So this is for the contradictory objective part.
So just so as I understand, if the objectives are not contradictory, then the silos could manage them kind of by themselves. They don't need to work together, but if they're contradictory, you really need to break those silos.
Exactly.
Across.
To me, the best image that I have to illustrate that is, it is that game, right, with the square, and you're trying to find out to connect the dot without, let's say, leaving the pencils, right? Yeah. And you're figuring out that you need to stay hard away. You need to get out of the building, right, and get out of the square to find the solution. To me, this is that, right? This is very much about setting objectives that you very much know that the organization will not be able to achieve that all alone. And you are not going to give them the resources and the means to do so because you don't want that organization to be autonomous to drive this. You want that organization to leverage what exists as far as resources is concerned, talent is concerned in other departments. So they work and they go end to end to achieve that. So to me, this is one key element that helps to cope with silos, right? The second point that I was mentioning is the overlap, right? Overlap is very key. Sometimes I take the example of a relay race, right? The relay race, you have many people running the same race, right? So if you take the analogy with the companies, we are many people and we are, let's say, all ears to make the company win, right? However, in a relay race, each and every individual that participate do have their very own race to do, right? They need to drive that very own race, individual race, at the best manner as they can to give a chance, right, to the overall objective to be achieved. And this is one key element. But where comes the overlaps on that? It comes where, let's say, you do have to build a very great ability to pass the baton. And this is the second objective that you have, right? Which is a kind of an objective that overlap with the objective of the other department that take the baton, right? And there is many ways to give the baton to your stakeholders so you make sure it is very much set for success, starting, let's say, the race. So you know that if you make a great, let's say, race, but you are not dealing very well, passing the baton, you fail. Not you in your very own, let's say, courses, you may have a very great score, but overall the company is going to fail. So to me, another point on which, let's say, you do have a kind of an opportunity to deal with silos is to make sure that the objective setting again for a given department, a given organization in the company, go beyond, let's say, the definition of its activities, right? Beyond the definition of its activities, copying and addressing a bit of the other activities that are in other departments. If I take an example, I've made, let's say, a few large transformations at group level, right? So I was the corporate guys, and on that aspect, I'm very quite sure that we will not be able to drive success in such a very large-scale transformation if we had not give a form of ownership in what we're trying to achieve at a kind of a company-wide level, giving a sense of ownership of that objective, which is not a department objective, which is very much a group-wide objective, and giving a sense of ownership of that to each and every department that are concerned to succeed. In addition to what they have to deliver each and every day. Here comes the overlap. So when you look at this, right, and you don't take a kind of a step back, you say, oh, but you do the same thing in the different ways and different manners in different departments. Yes, this is key. It creates fluidity and it creates a kind of a, let's say, common destiny, right, within the journey that we try to, let's say, achieve, because you create the willingness to each and everyone, no matter, let's say, where you are living, each department or geography, to achieve something that surpasses, something that goes beyond their very own sake.
Do you have an example that you can share from your work at Thales, where you've seen this happening in action, both the contradictory objectives and the overlapping functions?
So I think maybe one example that could be interesting is the, let's say, large transformation that we've run when it comes to establishing a kind of a digital transformation for marketing and sales function. And we let's say, we took the approach on that journey of, let's say, revisiting the customer journey engagement and all the processes that are related to that. This is, of course, very critical in our organization and in many ones. So the way we interact with customers and the way we drive the productive conversation that helps to, let's say, ultimately delivering result, delivering revenue. This is something that we wanted to, let's say, revisit from the lens of what kind of, let's say, benefits digital can bring in that process. And we call that initiative Thales Digital Seller, actually. And one example of overlap, concretely, is like when we revisit the processes and we took the opportunity to, let's say, formalize a kind of a bit more the activities, the responsibilities within those processes, etc., defining not very much what was existing, but defining what we wanted to foresee, what we wanted to see at play when it comes to excellence, when it comes to operational excellence. And we of course took the opportunity to deploy a digital platform, a sales enablement digital platform that we named ContentFlix, right? Because the idea of that ContentFlix actually was very much to give to the end of each and every person that are in interaction with prospect and customer within the group to have at their fingertips the, let's say, key element in terms of content that helps to sell. Not, being forced to rely on calling a friend or, let's say, sending an email to get the very, let's say, updated version of this and that and that. And so where we, let's say, have been, let's say, the opportunity of implementing a form of overlap is like we give a very concrete and formal role and responsibility to each and every organization involved. And as we are talking about a group-wide transformation, it was concerning the 30 business line or 68 countries. So a bunch of people, right? And we give to those people, to specific leaders that we appoint, right, to do so, a responsibility in terms of ownership for driving, maintaining, updating the digital platform that we wanted to, let's say, implement worldwide, right? So it was not the idea of having a kind of a platform group-wide, just managed by a few, at corporate level, etc. It was very much about giving to each and every organization of the company a sense of belonging and a sense of ownership of that platform to a point that they will have the opportunity to make very structural decision within that platform. How we design it, how we maintain it, how we, let's say, cope with, let's say, change or governance aspect within that platform. And this comes in addition to their day-to-day work. And this allows to very much create one team, one Thales, as we say it, and as we call it, one team, one Thales when it comes to that journey. So one example of overlaps, because definitely it was definitely something that was staying at the responsibility of the corporate team to oversee the transformation, but definitely the stakeholder of each and every businesses and each and every countries was also in a role of, building and guiding the destiny of how are we going to deal with that transformation.
And how do you convince them to do that? Because as you said, they're very busy, they've already got many things on their plate, and now they have this additional thing that they have to do. How did you stop them from saying, you guys take care of this at group level, that's your job, not our job?
Very simply, right? When you architecture such objective, it has to be resonating with something that they want to keep. Right, with something that they want to own, actually, right? If you say to let's say the different stakeholders that, okay, we're not going to own that, centrally only. We want to share that with you, right? And we want to, let's say, share the ownership with you. And this is what it means concretely. And if the answers correspond to something that they want to keep, as far as, let's say, the dynamics of the organization is concerned, as we said, then you have it, right? And you create that deal where different people coming from different departments and organization wants to achieve something that goes beyond the wall of their department. So this is for, let's say, overlap. When it comes to the contradictory objectives, right? Let me take the same example because we, of course, had to, let's say, implement that into play. Marketing and sales, right? They are very well known to ignore each other. Right? So this is a perfect point, right? Very well known. They are their own vocabulary, they are, let's say, their own things. The other guys talked about campaign, etc., etc. The sales teams, okay, what is a campaign, actually? And, the funny thing sometimes is like, they are very much contributing, right? Both, let's say, department entities to generate the revenue, right? And what we wanted to, let's say, establish when it comes to that transformation is to say that a content that enables sales, right? Not a content that is, let's say, just produced for the pleasure of marketing, it's great, it's fancy. No, a content that very much enables sales is very much a content that is built by both marketing and sales. So here's, by setting, let's say, the point of, here's we need to, let's say, figuring out how to build content, not what we call marketing content, which means only made by marketing teams, but content that enables sales enablement content, right? And to do so and succeeding in that, we need to have both of you guys, marketing and sales, figuring out how the content will be very much at the service of the funnel, of the marketing and sales funnels, and help us move the needles within that funnels. And so, of course, it creates a kind of a contradictory objective from the perception of the different teams, right? Because sales will be, but usually I'm not involved in creating content per se. So what is it going to be my role? What is it going to be my contribution, etc., etc.? And the marketing, same things. Usually we do that with agency and, stuff like that, very competent people. What is it that, the contribution of the sales team will be very much pivotal to do something that I'm doing each and every day, actually, right? Since years and years. And what we say is like, here's guys, right? Because again, it has to make sense. If not, it doesn't work, right? So we basically say, okay, you, sales, you are going to be the one using that content that is produced by your friends, marketing, when you, let's say, engage conversation with prospect and customers, okay? So when you are in that situation, you very much want to rely on the piece of content that uphold the right conversation the right way. They say correct. So to ensure that, you need to, let's say, have that very conversation with your marketing friends when it comes to sharing the feedback that you have to share based on your experience of using the content that they produce. Oh, guys, I've using that presentation or that, let's say, leaflet or whatsoever. The conversation went well, and then I had that question, right? And I was struggling answering that question with the, let's say, way we have shaping the paper or shaping the presentation, etc. Maybe we could, etc., etc., etc. And so we set that objectives to the sales family, saying that this is not an implicit, this is not a kind of a nice to have. It has to be a must have if you guys want to be in front of your prospect and customer and always be reassured that you will be relevant with the content that you have in your bag. Same thing for the marketing team. They were struggling, saying, you know what, we spend a lot of time, energy, money also as well, creating content, delivering that to the sales teams, and we don't have any noise, any, let's say, clue, any, sound, nothing to figuring out what is very much the ROI of what we do, okay? What is very much the connection between the efforts that we make and very much the way we can contribute, or we contribute actually to the revenue engine, right? And so, of course, they are very concerned about that because this is very much what makes a kind of a meaning, right, in their job in day to day. So here's, we've said, great, very, very, very good point. Here's how are we going to play that, right? You are going to set what is it to create a sales enablement content, and let's say, figuring out where are those proof points that will help you validate that this content that you have been creating is very much something that set the sales for success. And you create those different hypotheses, and you figuring out how you are going to validate that, right? And you deal and discuss and work with your sales friends to validate, because you cannot validate that all alone, right? So this is also a form of a contradictory point, because for marketing teams, right, they needed to understand what sales mean, right? Beyond, let's say, marketing, what sales mean, and to have some, let's say, objectives that are very much, let's say, falling in the bucket of sales traditionally, but sharing those objectives. So for them, it was a form of a contradictory point. But again, this is very much what helps to create that form of a disequilibrium in the companies that is helping moving forward to transform and to, let's say, achieve something that we cannot, achieve in the wall of a very department standalone, right?
So as a digital role, you're stepping in between marketing and sales in a way, and connecting them with digital technologies that can enable them both to do things more
exactly,
effectively.
absolutely.
Mm-hmm. And how did the pandemic influence what you were doing?
I think many things and many, let's say, great experience has been shared, right, regarding, let's say, what the pandemic has, let's say, gave in terms of both opportunities and threats also as well. I think as far as we've seen the points, right, and if I, let's say, double click again on the transformation that we was running at that time, I think in some aspect it has been, of course, we have dealt with some difficulties and issues, right? Because of course, overnight you have a kind of a disruption, right? At a level that you never foresee that, and you didn't prepare for such a kind of a level of disruption. So let's be very much clear. It has been a form of a disruption in the organization, and we had to cope with very sensitive and very, let's say, hard decision. Yeah. Having said that, I think it has also bring on the table some very great opportunity that we was not suspected, right? And it was quite very much counterintuitive. Sometimes when we run transformation, we try to figure out what will be the case for change, as we call it, right? What will be the case for change? I think in some aspects, the pandemic has been the case for change in itself. Because it had created, from one day to another, the necessity to transform even quicker, at even more speed that we was, let's say, able to envision and to drive before it happens, right? So I was talking about, let's say, the customer engagement process that is very much critical of our businesses. The pandemic has very much, let's say, put a stop to that process, right? Overnight, because many points of our process when it comes to customer engagement are relying on the fact that we, meet with people face to face. And the pandemic has been, let's say, a kind of a blackout when it comes to traveling, a blackout when it comes to, let's say, meeting prospect and customer during trade shows and during, let's say, conferences, etc., industry event, which is very critical for our businesses, and so on and so forth, right? And, thinking also about a point that is very much traditional in our companies, which is we are, let's say, operating in 68 countries, so we sell our products in those different countries. But of course, we don't have, let's say, the top-notch expert of each and every product that we want to sell in each of those countries distributed, right, equally in each and every countries where we're operating. So sometimes, and many times actually, we need to, let's say, at a certain moment of time, having the very, let's say, expert on something to jump, let's say, in a conversation, right? And better face-to-face again, to discuss with prospect and customer abroad, etc., etc. So the pandemic has been very much challenging, right? To continue to operate with an operational excellence and efficiency on that customer engagement chain. And so definitely it has been a kind of a wake-up call for us to reinvent ourselves and to transform ourselves. The good news is that we was running a transformation to do so, right? Revisiting the customer engagement, taking the opportunity of saying what will be the advantage that we can extract from digital. So on that aspect, this has been the best accelerators that we have seen so far in our companies when it comes to running a transformation.
Mm-hmm. And I suppose today, one of the hottest topics that people want to talk about is AI, and particularly generative AI. Is this something that that you're using, exploring, and what is your feeling generally about generative AI?
Well, my feeling, Michael, of that is like we need to be cautious, right? We need to be cautious. I think I understand, and I hear also the voice, right, that we, let's say, see out there, and the many headlines, etc., etc. So definitely, I think the subject is very much, living a form of a hype, and it's, let's say, very sometimes quite overwhelming. You feel press of delivering a Gen AI, right? So where is your use case, right? And you figure like, okay, I need to find a use case. You don't know why, you don't know what kind of a use case is, but you need to find it because you feel like a side of the story if you don't have it. I think we need to be cautious because Gen AI is very, let's say, impressive when it comes to mimicking and delivering outcomes related to one given task, not one given job.
Right.
One given task. How many tasks are you doing when you are, let's say, delivering in your job? Many, many. Are those tasks disconnected from one to another or very much connected as a kind of a system? Of course they are connected. Are those tasks some kind of a always explicit task? Or is it true that it also embeds implicit tasks like interpersonal skills and those things, right? Of course it is. So we need to be cautious because we do have a kind of a great and impressive tools, right? But it helps to deliver one task or another, not the whole bunch of tasks that you need to cope with when you are doing your job correctly, and even more when you're trying to, let's say, be the best achiever. And it doesn't cope also with the, let's say, necessity of emotional intelligence that also make a big difference in each and every organization to achieve goals. Right? I mean, this is not, let's say, kind of a secret to say that within organization, there is kind of a 3 pillars that are key to achieve, right? And this is not related to task per se. Good humor, motivation, and also a form of, let's say, understanding and even a kind of a trust between people. If you don't have the good humor, motivation, and trust between people, I mean, complex, even though you are dealing with a group of great experts, great achiever, let's say, taking one, let's say, individually from one to another, you will not achieve very, great outcomes. So to me, the point is like, great tool, impressive in terms of, let's say, executing some task, and we need to figuring out how to, let's say, include what could be beneficial for the organization, taking into account that it brings a value very much limited in one task, and sometimes to achieve a kind of an outcome, right? Like delivering my strategy, right? It is more than one task.
So you're suggesting that the focus or the concern of generative AI replacing jobs is a massive oversimplification.
Yes,
and the fact that generative AI can do some tasks very well, but other tasks it can't do well at all. And so the risk if organizations replace people with AI, they're throwing a lot away that those people would bring that the AI cannot replace.
Absolutely, absolutely. And we are not there yet. I don't know if in the future we will see something like this, but today we are very much not it. Huh? So this is very much important for leaders, right? To consider that the human capabilities is way, let's say, impressive, than what we can see with the Gen AI achieving a given task, even though it is achieved in 1 second.
So it's a good focus to think about JI as task replacement rather than job replacement.
Yes, yes. And when you look at your processes, this is to me what something that obsesses me actually, right? You look at your processes and you know that it is, composed sometimes in like hundreds of tasks. Tasks that you see with naked eyes, tasks that you don't see, right? I mean, we all have, let's say, experienced the situation working with someone, and then that someone goes to another job, right? And we start to figuring out that, wow, that person was so critical, beyond what we was seeing so far. Because he has that kind of a link with the people, having that form of ability to make things together, to, let's say, help the collaboration happening. All those things that are sometimes invisible to naked eyes are very strategic and very pivotal when it comes to delivery outcomes. So having a message that, let's say, give to the different colleagues saying, okay, look, Gen AI is going to replace your jobs. I mean, it might make a kind of a, let's say, funny discussion, right? When we're talking, when we are, let's say, taking coffee, tea, etc. But seriously, let's be very conscious about what we are, let's say, saying on that, especially at leadership position. It is just about one task, first. Second, it has to be embedded in a form of a very efficient way in the system of tasks on which you need to rely to achieve a given outcome. And last but not least, it is not perfect. So it requires a level of expertise, a level of knowing what you do, right? To be able to, let's say, be yourself the gatherers of what the Gen AI is generating, right? Because you don't want to, let's say, copy and paste what something that generative AI has been produced and send that to your customers without checking and controlling and verifying it. So again, I think great tools. We need to be, let's say, very conscious in terms of the transformation that we want to uphold in that aspect.
And what it can do and what it can't do. And if something, as you said, like accuracy is important, as it could be in aerospace, as it could be in cybersecurity, then you have to be cautious about understanding the limits of these types of tools.
Absolutely.
Hamilton, we've taken a lot of your time today, but I'm wondering if you have any final thoughts you'd like to share about how digital and or AI is used in organizations today.
Maybe my final thoughts will be about, because of course we are, let's say, considering what will be the great way, right, to, let's say, bring some kind of advantage coming from Gen AI actually, to, let's say, having a form of enhancement of what we do, while making sure that we not disrupt what we do well, right? Contradictory point also as well. And on that aspect, something that we have learned so far is like, sometimes we might, let's say, fall in the trap of figuring out use cases that we try to prioritize, right? And looking at the kind of, let's say, y-axis when it comes to gain benefits, or let's say, potential benefits, and the x-axis when it comes to feasibility, when it comes to technical feasibility, right? And feeling like, okay, everything that fall in the, let's say, upper right quadrant is quite very much something on which we need to put investment energies and we go for it. This is not true. This is not true. Mm-hmm. Because again, you are talking about a tool, and the tool in itself will not do the work. So it means that you need to consider the human in that equation. You need to consider the human in that equation. And basically it means that before, let's say, figuring out the y-axis with the gain and the x-axis with the feasibility, the technical feasibility, before that, you need to figuring out the potential gains. So let's keep that y-axis. But when it comes to the x-axis, you need to figuring out what is it that it brings as far as the maturity of your processes is concerned. What is it that the maturity of your processes tells you? Because if you're trying to implement the Gen AI in activities, right, basically overarching a form of a processes where the organization already are not mature, are not deliver, let's say, results, are still learning, right, in working, they will not be able and they will not be comfortable in a great position just to control what Gen AI is going to deliver.
So the x-axis, the feasibility axis, is actually a lot more complex. Because
Exactly.
it's more than just
It's not just technically speaking. It has to be first, let's say, process-wise and human-wise speaking, right? Are you talking about, let's say, delivering a form of a use cases powered by GenAI or AI, where you know that the organization has been achieved a great level of excellence when it comes to delivering in a given processes? Because of course, each and every use cases are living in a given processes, and sometimes more than one. Are you sure about that? And this is the assessment that needs to be made to make sure that you, let's say, empower or bring additional power in a foundation where you know your people are very, let's say, let's say, how to say that, very, let's say, knowledgeable when it comes to delivering. They are going to criticize what, let's say, the GenAI is delivering, saying, oh, this is not correct, this is not accurate, this is not consistent, etc. The less you, let's say, wants to navigate in that space, in some foundation where your very own colleagues and teams are not that well mature, and the less they will be able to say, this is not accurate, this is not consistent, etc., etc., etc. And you found yourself as a risk decreasing the performance of your processes at the end. So to me, this is maybe the final point, right, that we are, let's say, currently experiencing also as well in our companies, which is, this is finally a kind of a great invitation to figuring out what operational excellence means, having a form of a very great assessment and fair assessments in terms of where do we perform well, and then to start to figuring out and prioritize where we are doing great, to figuring out and to see how could we, let's say, be greater.
Fantastic. Hamilton, thank you so much for speaking with us today. It's been a pleasure talking to you.
Thank you, Michael. Thank you.